So product market validation, why is this topic so critical? Many first-time entrepreneurs start out with their idea and just jump straight into building it. That was me 10 years ago. I had this brilliant idea many years ago, and I just decided I'm going to go ahead and do this. I went to the bank, I took a loan, and I literally spent $50,000 and 3 years of my life building something that nobody wanted. Imagine how painful that was. So I would always want to have that experience because it's what brought me here today with everything that I know about crowdfunding and launching products, but it doesn't have to be that way. Jumping straight into it, 80% of startups fail. And this is across many industries, hardware and physical products being one of them. And the number one reason for failure is most often the lack of consumer demand. We know that many products take many months to develop. The average is about 15 months. In my case, it was more like 36, like I spent literally 3 years. And the costs vary a lot, but it can easily cost 6 figures to develop a product and launch it into the market. So we need to be very careful before we make that decision to bring something to the market. So let me go over a couple of examples, one of them being Colos and the one on the right, which is my own company that a decade ago, and that failed on Kickstarter miserably because they built something that nobody wanted. This is like a racing wheel for iPad. You can see that you just clamp the whole wheel on a table, you put your iPad inside, and you just tilt left and right. And I thought at the time I was a genius, right? Everyone is going to buy it. Like there's nothing like it. I literally felt like a genius. I went to Amazon. I was looking for like a racing wheel for iPad, and literally there was nothing there. And I felt, okay, this is going to be big. So what ended up happening was I spent all this time, all this money, all this energy. I literally burned out for 3 years only to launch it on Kickstarter and to realize I was building something that nobody wanted. So that's my story and how it started. And on the left, you have a much bigger failure than mine, which is called Juicero. Maybe some of you remember. This is a product that literally didn't solve any need. It was like a juicer that was squeezing out fresh juices that you were receiving in your mailbox. It looked pretty interesting, pretty cool. But then it turned out that you can literally squeeze out the juice yourself with your bare hands. So it's pretty crazy. Now, there wasn't like an amazing article, like a breakdown of Juicero, how complicated the internals of this thing actually were. Like it took hundreds and hundreds of engineers to design the Juicero. Like it looks super fancy on the outside, but the inside, you just can't imagine how complex this thing was. And, imagine spending all of this time and money, like $100 million investment on this business and so many man hours into building something that literally nobody needs. I think the right word is like, oops. The end goal with product market validation is to make sure that we're building something that people want before we actually build it. So one of our own failures many years ago was this phone stand. It's on the right side, like next to the sofa. Even our image wasn't that good. Like you don't really understand what we're selling. But we spent so much time and money on this product, and we already turned into an agency back then, many years ago. And we spent like countless hours, like 20, 30 people involved in this campaign, which was just like a normal, like a nice minimalistic looking stand for your. And we said, okay, like this was working in a market, which was, I think back then, South Korea. So someone tested it in South Korea. So we made assumptions based on previous demand that this would actually sell like hotcake. The price, we said, okay, it's going to be $99 because that's what worked in the past. And the result, obviously, for us personally, like $17,000 was a big failure because we spent all that time and money and energy building the video, building the page, building like the whole strategy around it, only to raise $17,000. So the goal was low because the product was already made, like the initial iteration of the product was already made. So we didn't really need that much money. So the client, like the creator, didn't really need that much in order to bring it to the market. He already had some stock in place for the upgraded version. So the 17,000 was after like a 30-day campaign where we spent all this time and energy building up the buzz and creating the videos and all that kind of stuff. So we consider that a failure personally, although we exceeded the funding goal. That for us personally is now a failure. So here are the lessons that we learned with all of that. First of all, we first need to validate the demand, the market demand, before we launch something to the public. That's our number one priority right now. We also need to test the different price points, because I said, okay, we launched at $99, the previous product. We need to make sure that this is a price people are willing to pay. It turns out that price point was like way too expensive because people, they're not used to paying like $99 for a phone stand. It's just too much. And then what we learned is we need to either find a product market fit before we do anything, or we need to iterate until a point where it actually makes sense to sell the product. So in that particular case, we didn't do like a second version. We didn't iterate to make a new variation of it. But with what we do right now in our process and everything we teach at Creator Club, you need to work on your value proposition and features and benefits for the customer until you find the product market fit. So the biggest takeaway is you only need to launch validated products that will actually sell when you go to market. It doesn't matter if it's crowdfunding, it doesn't matter if it's e-commerce. You need to launch something that's already been validated, and the rest will be much easier just because people will buy what you're selling. And in many cases, first-time entrepreneurs do exactly the opposite. They don't test the products, they don't test the ideas, they jump straight into building it and going straight to market. And then spending all the time and money and energy on manufacturing, production, the first production run, the minimum order quantities, like pouring huge amounts of money and energy into something that they don't really know is going to sell. So that's problematic. So what you need to do, and I'm going to describe the reservation funnel that we're doing right now with all of our projects, and that you should do yourself as well if you want to make sure you're building the right thing and people are willing to pull out their wallet and give you money. So here's the process. We bring traffic to a landing page. So a landing page is any page on a website that has traffic to it. So it's a complicated term, but let's say your homepage where you host your product is a landing page. So the traffic from Facebook and Instagram where we run advertising, because that's the quickest, most effective way we found out to be effective from anything we've tested out there. From all the advertising ways, Facebook and Instagram ads are everything we need to get started quickly, because you get instant traffic to your page once you launch your advertising campaign. So you bring traffic to the homepage or to a landing page where you have your product. You have your product, you have your description of the product, you have images, maybe you have some visuals. You describe what the product is about. So this is like the framework. We're going to go into the details over the next slides. After someone signs up on your landing page, they become a non-VIP lead. Let's call them non-VIP lead. So they become like an email subscriber, right? With those people, you can send a survey, like an email survey right away, asking them several questions. We're going to discuss the questions in a bit. But what's more important, on that same page, after they signed up, they're usually taken to a second page, right? So you have the homepage, the landing page, where you sign up after you see the entire product. Then after you sign up, you go to that VIP offer page. And what is a VIP? The VIP is a place to put down a deposit towards your product. Let's say your product costs $500. You can say, put down a deposit of $10 to guarantee that you're going to take the lowest price for when our product goes live, either on crowdfunding or we launch it through e-commerce. You can take $1, you can take $5, you can take $10, depending on your price point. So if it's a higher price, we always recommend charging a little bit more. So $10 is a good ballpark. if someone reserves that amount, then they become a VIP lead. And then later on, I'm going to show you which tools we use in order to set up all of this so you can get an idea. So as you can see, both the VIP leads and the non-VIP leads, they both get surveys through which you can understand more about who these people are. We're going to get into the details a bit later. So as I said, there are four main components we're now going to discuss. These are the advertising, the landing page, the reservation page, where the VIPs can put down a deposit, and the feedback surveys. So the first one is advertising. Like, it all starts with advertising. And here we have an example of one of our projects called DuoVox. So if you go to duovoxmate.com, you're going to see our existing website where we're currently email signups, and we're also allowing people to put down a deposit towards a campaign that we're launching with this particular product. So what we're doing with advertising is the following. We're testing different audiences. So as you can see on the right side, we are testing audiences which include Indiegogo, for example. IG stands for Indiegogo in our case because we're going to launch the campaign on crowdfunding. So the two biggest platforms are Kickstarter and Indiegogo, right? So we're testing different audiences to understand what works. So this is one part of the audiences that we tested. So IG means Indiegogo, and then narrowed down to driving, right? Then the next one is narrowed to security camera, because our product is a camera with which you can see literally at night. So you can put it as a dash cam on in your car, although that's not like a super common use case. You can go out and take pictures of wildlife, many different things you can do at night. It's actually pretty cool. So that's why we set up all of these different audiences to test what audience is going to work the best, like where we're going to get the lowest conversion, the highest conversion at the lowest cost. So the next thing we do with each campaign is we test different visuals. You're going to see here we have two visuals, but usually we're testing dozens. There's no place to put like all of the pictures that we're literally using, but maybe 20, 30, or even 40 images we're testing at the same time with Facebook advertising. So this allows you to really understand what visual would resonate with that specific audience. The next thing we're doing is we're testing the messaging, because each audience is going to resonate with different messaging. For example, we could target photographers, right? The messaging for photographers is going to be completely different than people who would perhaps use it as a dash cam, or people who would use it maybe as a security camera at home, because the camera can see and detect movement and literally see through the darkness. So the messaging for all of these audiences would be different. And so would be the visual. So these are like really the core elements of running, Facebook advertising. And the most important one is optimizing after you've launched your campaigns. You need to be tweaking the messaging. You need to be tweaking the visuals. You need to be finding the most optimal ads that are working and killing everything else. So that's a high level overview of what we're doing. We do offer more in Creator Club, like we go into details about advertising, how to run your own advert. This is just a high level overview of what you can do when you're running the advertising. So the next core element is a landing page. So as we said, landing page, most cases that's your homepage. So that's where you send all the traffic. In our case, that's duovoxmate.com. So the landing page explains what is the product. It also shows different use cases. Here, we don't have the use cases right now, but if you go to the website, you're going to see many different use cases of the product and how you can use it. You can use it for, let's say, city photography, wildlife photography, security camera, dash cam. So all of these we're describing in deep details so people can really understand what we're actually selling. So you need to go into the details of what your product is, what the use cases are, and how it's going to benefit the customer. So we're also talking about the advantages, like the competitive advantages of the product compared to, let's say, an iPhone or a GoPro, because they would be some products that people would normally use maybe at this stage, because there aren't that many night vision cameras. This is like one of the first. There are one or two other competitors, but this one, like the image compared to the rest, is like really sharp. So if you take your iPhone and compare it to this, it's going to be, you're probably not going to see anything, because literally with the Dual Box, you can see in almost complete darkness. You only need maybe the moon and probably a few stars to see through to make a good picture and a video. And so we're showing those comparisons on the website because that's what people want to know. And the final thing is the price. We don't show any price. As you can see, we are prompting people to reserve their launch invite. So it can be a crowdfunding invite for a launch on crowdfunding or Kickstarter, or it can also be your e-commerce launch, for example. But we're purposefully not showing the price. The reason we're doing that is because we want to understand, is there interest in the product itself? Because if we put the price up here and people don't subscribe, then we're not going to know, is it the product or is it the price? And you only need to be selling a product that people are willing to pay the price for. So for this structure, we do it on purpose. We don't show the price. You can only sign up to be the first to know about the launch and to get maybe the super early bird in our case, because that's going to be a crowdfunding campaign. So the next stage is the reservation page, where people would put down a deposit to be the first to get the discounted price of the product. In our case, this product would go for over $1,000 when it hits retail. But for the crowdfunding launch, we're doing a discount, which is going to be at around $5.99 if you put down a deposit of $10. So you can see right after you subscribe, you're taken to this page. And the page says, time to complete your reservation. Put down a $10 reservation deposit and only pay a total of $5.99 when we launch. And then people could put down their deposit here. They're going to be taken to Stripe, where they put down the deposit, and then they're going to be shown a thank you page. So this is where the magic happens. If you have a decent amount of people reserving, and we're going to look into the numbers shortly, then you are onto something. If this page is not working well, you need to understand why it's not working. Most probably, it's the price. If people are not putting down a deposit here, probably it's the price. If enough people are signing up on your homepage, on the landing page, and by enough, at least 10%, like 10% is like a bare minimum, but the more, the better. So 15, 20, currently our landing page is converting at maybe 20%, which is good, right? It's not amazing, like amazing conversion rates are like 40%, which are rather rare, I would say, but 10% is probably the bare minimum. So keep all of these numbers in mind. The feedback surveys are something that is going to help you understand more about your own product from your potential customers. So something like, what did you like most about DualBox or my own product? What similar products did you own before? So you can make a comparison with their past experience of a particular product that they used and they probably weren't that happy with. The next thing is, what feature would you like to see added to our product? So maybe people would think of something that you never thought of that is actually pretty cool, and it should be added in your product eventually. Obviously, don't always rush in adding a feature to a product that hasn't even been out yet, because this can delay your development times a lot. This can complicate the product unnecessarily. So be mindful before adding new features, like understand if they're really needed. And then one of the questions you can ask is, what do you plan on using our product? So in this case, you would literally be asking, what are the use cases people would most likely use your product for, which is important because you might be thinking, oh, they're probably going to go and shoot some wildlife with this, with the jewel box, for example. But in reality, they're not going to do any of that. And probably they're going to go just fishing and use the camera maybe to light up and see maybe where the fish is, for example, or what other boats are, for example. So the point is, the assumptions that you have about how people would use your product are not always as you imagine them. So here's some benchmarks, and the benchmarks is something that we strive for every time. However, they need to be taken with a grain of salt because they would vary from project to project. So this is a product called Blank Mask, which had a subscription rate of 22%, where the benchmark for this particular type of product, it's a cool mask. Here's how it looks. It's an egg-shaped, weird-looking, funky-looking mask, which raised $500,000 on Indiegogo. So based on the benchmarks, this mask would have done pretty well. So subscription rate was over 20%. Reservation rate was over 2%, which is quite a significant achievement. And the pre-launch metric, which we're going to discuss in a bit, is 9%. So this is the product. It raised $500,000. We run this campaign back then, and it did quite well. We didn't really expect it to do so well, but it actually did. So it's all in the numbers. Like, numbers don't lie, however funky and quirky a product might look. So let's now discuss what actually matters and what doesn't when you're building your own websites and focusing on this stage of your journey, the product market validation. The branding and the landing page design don't matter nearly as much when it comes to comparing to the product presentation and the customer feedback. Like, branding, you don't need to have it right now at this stage of your journey because it's just too early to have it. You don't need it. Don't focus on that. Don't spend time and money on it. The landing page design, that's also related to the branding, more or less, because you might want to use certain colors and some branding schemes. You don't need that at this stage of your journey. What actually matters is the product presentation, how you present your product, the copy you're using to position your product, the different pictures, visuals, GIFs, videos you're using to showcase your product so people understand what it actually does and who it might benefit. Is it for them or is it for someone else? Do they need to leave the page or do they need to give you their email address? And the other thing that matters is customer feedback. So people are going to ask questions literally on your own website. You can install even like a messenger chat button. It's clunky. I'm not a fan of it, but it works, right? If someone asks a question, you're going to see that question. There are also some free tools that you could use for that. So some people, they're going to ask you stuff that is unclear to them. And this can guide your decisions about upgrading your page. Maybe a feature is unclear, maybe something else needs to be updated. So these are the two main things that matter: customer feedback and the product presentation when you're building your page. So the question we all need to be answering before we're building a product and launching it into the world, is this something I can sell to enough people at a price they're willing to pay? So this sentence is something that we should all focus on and think about a lot and test a lot before we make any decisions for launching a product, because we need to be able to sell the product at a price people are willing to pay. But that price, for example, might be a price that you're not profitable at. So if you have your costs of goods sold, or the COGS, and you understand that the COGS are around $100, and then it turns out people are not willing to pay more than $100 or $200, then you're not going to have a sustainable business, just because you won't be able to scale this into e-commerce or crowdfunding or retail even. Just on retail, you could see margins going up to 30 and even 50% when you're talking to distributors just to carry your product. So if your cost of goods sold is, let's say, $100, you will probably not be successful if the product doesn't sell at least maybe $350 or $400. So you have enough margin to play with when you go into the different stages, e-commerce, Amazon, retail, etc. So that's very important. And that's why this product validation stage is so critical, because that's where you would understand, do people actually need this at the price I'm willing to offer them? So how to find the best audiences? We already discussed this, but essentially we need to target different audiences based on the use cases. So I gave you a couple of examples with the jewel box. We are going after the different audiences that might potentially use this. So we're going after photographers, like professional photographers. That's one use case. The other use case is people who would enjoy wildlife photography. They might not necessarily be professional photographers. Another type of potential audience and use case could be using it as a dash cam in your car, although not that popular. Another use case is a security camera at home where it detects the movement. So people, if they break in, then you're instantly going to know. So we're testing all the different use cases and trying to understand who the product is actually for. So here, something important to consider. The dual box, we decided to go a bit broad and not focus on like a target market specifically, just because first of all, the product is very new and it could have like many use cases. So there are not that many competitors that cover each of the use cases. So we decided, why limit the scope with this particular product when we literally have maybe one or two other competitors, like direct competitors. Why limit the scope to just, let's say, wildlife photography, where we can show like 10 different use cases where people can identify like being the customer for that specific use case, and they could potentially want this. However, this strategy might not always work if you're in a commoditized market. So if you're selling something that many other people are selling, you need to have a big differentiator. And probably, let's say you're selling a shoe that is made out of some sustainable material. Maybe it's made out of coffee. Then like your target market, like the audience, wouldn't be everyone who's wearing shoes. It would probably be people who are environmentally cautious, who care about the environment, about their impact, about their just footprint on the planet. So that's very different than selling a shoe to everyone. And the other thing we're doing is we're targeting for interest. So this goes mostly for Facebook and for Instagram. You could target for different interests that people have. So that's another way to understand where, like in which bucket people fall into. And then the surveys, we already discussed that you're sending people who sign up on your landing page and become VIPs. You send them surveys to understand more about your product. So here are some ideas of what we did when it comes to the interest for this particular product that I'm discussing, DualBox. So one of the interests was camcorders, right? So this is like a particular interest on Facebook that we used. Another one was like popular camera brands, let's say Canon or Olympus or Pentax. So all of these brands, we just targeted and saw how people react. Some of them converted better, some of them converted worse. So we killed everything that didn't convert well enough. So for example, as I said earlier, we narrowed down some of these interests to driving. So the initial interest was Indiegogo. So IG stands for Indiegogo. And then we narrowed down by camcorders. Then we used several different interests. We used several different camera brands. For example, we narrowed down by boating and fishing, because some people, they actually go fish at night and they would probably use such a device. And then you can see how many purchases, so how many leads and how many purchases we had. So the purchase is where someone puts down a deposit. So you can see the amounts that we spent, the click-through rate, so meaning the amount of people that clicked on out of everyone that sees it, which is about 3.5% conversion, so 3.5% click-through rate, which is quite okay. Landing page views, these are the people who landed on our landing page. The leads, people who signed up on the landing page. And then the purchases is those who put down a deposit. So this is part of the survey that we send to people to understand what they're really doing with what's the current state of affairs, if you will. So one of the questions in our survey was, are you a professional photographer? And we can see that many people literally said, no, I'm not, which is totally fine. So we know that we're not after photographers only, and we're going broad. So many people, we asked them about the camera. They said they have some Sony, some Nikons, some Canons. So we're trying to understand what they're actually using right now. And we could potentially take those brands and put them on Facebook as interest. So this is giving us a lot of ideas. You can also see that we are asking questions. What are the most important things you're looking for when buying a new camera? So we're trying to understand what they care, what do they care about when it comes to purchasing a new camera. So the other question, which is relevant in our case, is did you own any night vision device? Most of them said no. So that's an opportunity for us because those people could be potentially the first users of DualBox, and they could take for the first time in their life nighttime shots. And then we had some other questions that just help us understand who these people are. So I strongly recommend to send surveys to understand what your potential customers are actually thinking and doing right now. So going into the metrics, which is something that we discussed earlier, let's go over the most important metrics we're doing, like a product market validation. The first one is the price. These are the metrics from DualBox, literally in the beginning stage of the product testing. And you can see here, the subscription rate in the middle is like actually really low, like 10%. Right now, our subscription rate is like for the past few days, maybe over 20%. So it literally doubled after we incorporated the real images, the natural images. So the first thing is the price you're testing. You want to test many different prices, right? Because you have assumption about what is actually going to sell. Is it $4.99? Is it $5.99? Is it $9.99 maybe? So our competitors, they sell at $9.99. So we decided, since we don't want to go to retail just yet and compete on that price, we decided to test $5.99, give people like 40-50% discount, and we're seeing the following outcome. So first thing is the visitors. So how many people landed on the page? How many from those people converted? So subscription rate is 10%, which isn't great. Reservations, 60. This means out of all 1,000 leads, 60 people put down a deposit. So the deposit amount in this case was about $10. So the price was $4.99, and we put down like a fairly high deposit of about $10. The subscription rate we discussed already around 10% for this price, and then the reservation rate was about 0.57%. So this one wasn't great. Currently, after much more money spent on advertising, we've spent now 5 figures on advertising. The reservation rate isn't much higher than this, than 0.6, but that's actually fine because what we care about is the following few metrics. First of all, cost per lead, which is the amount that when you divide the money that you spend, so in this case, it would be $2,478 ad spend in the second column, you divide that by all the leads. So in this case, you would get $2.35. This one is actually pretty good. $2 is like a pretty good cost per lead right now, because currently, after spending 5 figures, ours is even higher. Like currently, I think we're standing at maybe close to $4. So the more you spend, the more the cost per lead would probably increase. If the audience is maybe too niche, if you don't optimize, or something is not working quite right, you're going to see even more. And if there is more competition for your own category, then you're also going to see more cost per lead. So the cost per reservation is how much it's actually costing you in ad spend money for someone to put down a deposit, like a $10 deposit. Currently, it's costing us around $40. In this specific snapshot, it's costing us $40 for the $4.99. For the $5.99, it's costing us about $51. So the pre-launch metric, the cost per reservation and the pre-launch metric is what matters. The pre-launch metric is this same number, cost per reservation, divided by the price that you are testing. So 59 divided by 599, 41 divided by 499. This is the pre-launch metric, and this is what matters. You don't want to be over 10%. This is what we noticed. And this is the metric that you should be paying close attention to. So cost per reservation and pre-launch metric. Your cost per reservation shouldn't be too high relative to your price. And your pre-launch metric shouldn't be above 10%. So if your cost per reservation is too high, naturally your pre-launch metric would also be high. So you would see that something is not working. You need to be tweaking some parts of your funnel, whether that's the price, whether that's the conversion rate, whether that's the reservation rate. You need to be making tweaks to your funnel in order to get to a point where the pre-launch metric is under $10.
Hey there, this is John Teal, founder of Predictable Designs. If you enjoyed this video and you want to keep learning more about developing, manufacturing, and selling new hardware products, then be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also check out the websites predictabledesigns.com and thehardwareacademy.com.